But I started off, as a laborer. I moved up to a pipe layer. And what you do when you're a laborer, you're working hand in hand with a pipe layer. So you get to learn what they're doing. You ask questions. If you're interested in that, then you find out exactly what you got to do. And then you got to be motivated enough to get down that ditch and be able to do your job on top of the ditch, but also get down the ditch and learn from a seasoned professional.
And action. Now we're good.
So Jeff, in your career path, have you done any mentoring either for someone or with someone else that's mentored you?
Well, yes. As far as me mentoring someone, everyone that's ever worked for me, is starting off on a lower level. We've always tried to give them the opportunity, to progress. We try to teach them the best we can. Of course, production is key. You can only do so much when you're on an active job site. But, my thing is, in our industry, where you're doing grading and excavation and utility work, everybody wants to sit in the seat of a piece of equipment. And I get that. I was the same way. But I started off, as a laborer. I moved up to a pipe layer. And what you do when you're a laborer, you're working hand in hand with a pipe layer. So you get to learn what they're doing. You ask questions. If you're interested in that, then you find out exactly what you got to do. And then you got to be motivated enough to get down that ditch and be able to do your job on top of the ditch, but also get down the ditch and learn from a seasoned professional. And then if you want to move on to a piece of equipment, I used to tell people, I'm not telling you to skip lunch, but if you got a sandwich in your lunch bucket, eat that sandwich, an hour or so before lunchtime. Save you a snack for later on when everybody else goes to lunch. Get on that piece of machinery and just play with it. Get familiar with it. Learn a little bit about it. And as far as me mentoring for someone, my dad taught me some stuff. His partner Tony, he taught me some stuff. And I asked questions. You got to be willing to ask questions. If you're interested in a position, you want to progress, you're not going to do it unless you're motivated. You've got to be motivated. And you're not going to be motivated if you're not asking questions. You've got to learn about that position, what it takes to do that position. I had key operators, and foremen that I really looked up to when I was coming up in the field. Roy Seagraff, he's passed on now. He was what I call a jack of all trades, and he was a master of most. As the old saying is, jack of all trades, master of none. But he could pretty well master any of it. He could run any piece of equipment. He could do grade work. He could do pipe work. He wasn't really educated, as far as a degree or anything. And I don't think he even finished high school. He struggled a little bit on sewer and grade work, because you had to do a lot of calculations and stuff. But he figured it out. He would make it work. And when he got confused, he would ask someone else. But it's one of those things, it's the beauty of being in America. The sky's the limit. Whatever you're willing to do and put the effort up, you can learn anything. And, what people don't realize, when it comes to mentoring, it's as simple as being interested in something and asking questions. If you ask the right questions to the right people and they're motivated enough to see you excel and you're willing to excel, then you can learn all you need to learn, just by finding someone that you can trust and ask the right questions.
And so in some industries, like if you were a stockbroker, for example, you'd be hesitant to mentor someone, most likely.
Well, yeah, especially you don't want to give away the secrets of the trade.
Right, well, because they're going to cut into your opportunities.
Exactly.
How do you feel about the construction industry? Do you feel like there's more openness, or is there any sense that if I teach this guy the things that I know, that he's going to take my job?
Well, it's not. I'm not so much worried about someone taking my position. And if you go back a few years, when the construction industry was down, you'd go 2008, 2009, all the way up to 2013. There were a lot of small construction businesses that went under in the downturn. And since then, there's been hundreds of construction companies that started up. But what happens is you get a lot of these small businesses that, are people that have been at lower level and they progressed here and they progressed there. And in their mind, hey, I can do this. I can make a living at this. They go out and start their own business. But what happens is they don't do the homework. They haven't been mentored enough. They don't know there's a business side. Even though construction is physical, hands-on, there's still a business side to it. You know, when you go from doing the work to actually projecting the work and bidding work, you've got to know what that work costs. You've got to know what your equipment costs. You got to know what your employees cost. Well, they go out and they start these businesses, and what happens is when you have a bunch of them come together, small businesses that start up and they don't know how to control their cost or what their actual cost is, well, they kind of play a role in setting the market. And when you look at these bigger companies, you know, you don't see these multi-million-dollar companies bidding on this little site work, bidding on these small projects because they're not profitable. Because you got all these startups that are going in there at cost or under cost or minimum profit. Well, they can't compete with them because they know what it costs them to run their job, what it costs them to do that job. Well, you know, before long, you see this one fall off because he's not making adequate money. Then here later, you know, this one falls off. And, you know, they continue to pop up because everybody's got the mentality, you know, I've been doing this for a couple, 3 years, you know, I can run my own business. I've got the concept. But, you know, you don't because you haven't seen the business side of it.
So how does one go about learning those costs? Is it just a matter of making your way up through the ranks and getting familiar with those parts of the field?
It is. And I mean, if you do go to school, you know, there's nothing wrong with going to college. You know, I suggest going to trade school because there's such a need for trade right now. But, you know, get a business degree in construction. You know, there's all kinds, you know, there's construction management, you know, construction business. There's all kinds of things you can learn, you know, and it's going to teach you how the business side of it. But to be adequate in the business side, you need to come in and work at the lower level and work your way up. Just because you got a degree does not mean you know exactly what it's going to take to put that job in because you haven't physically done that work. And I've said this for years, you know, over and over, because I've seen so many different designs on projects from architects and engineers. You know, in my mind, for an engineer to be able to design a job and do it right, he should have a minimum of 5 years in the field doing the work.
Jeff, I have a question.
All right.
What about like the architectural side of it, like designing the building? Is there any value in that guy having an understanding of construction, of how you actually build something, or is that
Well, yeah, I'd say there is. I mean, I don't do a whole lot. You know, most of my stuff is done under a civil engineer. There are some civil engineer and architects out there that are 1-on-1. And you'll see some discrepancies, you know, when you have those relationships there where you have an architect that is performing a civil engineer job. You know, there'll be a lot of controversy in what he's designed as far as site grade work and utilities. But in any aspect of design, you know, you need to have some field experience to know what you're designing, you know, to know if it's actually physically going to work. Just because it looks good on paper doesn't mean it's going to happen out in the field. So, you know, it's key to me or not key, but I mean, it's tough for me to believe that someone can come right out of engineering school or right out of architectural school and start designing work when they haven't physically put the work in to see how it needs to properly be installed.
I can attest to that.
So a kid can go to school and get a degree in architectural engineering kind of stuff. In your opinion, he or she still needs to go into the field now
with
an
experience,
actual understanding of how that stuff is put together.
Yeah, because it's going to change his whole concept of that, you know, of what he's designing or she's designing.
Yeah, we see that a lot. Because I'm an electrical engineer, and I see that time and time again where our sales team has an idea. They're the ones generating the proposals, but they may do a poor job for accounting for the intricacies of each project. And unless you've been in the field doing those things, there are so many considerations that, at least on paper, you won't take into account, but when the time for the invoice comes along, you know, you underestimated your labor costs, or there were so many materials that weren't accounted for that your profit margins, they can still consider it a win because they're making a profit. But I think you've touched on this before. If you don't make your profit margin, you're actually losing money.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that mentality is kind of hard to drive into somebody who doesn't have that field experience, because the sales team, most of the time, they've already made the sale regardless of the number, because they've sold the idea
Yes.
of the job. And if you've got people that can account for all those different pieces, or at least if they can't account for every piece, if they know they're typically undercutting each job by 10%, 20%, they can kind of fudge those numbers a little bit to be more accurate with contingencies
Right.
and other kind of hidden costs to make up for the fact that they don't have that knowledge. But if they don't account for that, ultimately the jobs don't look too good.
Yeah. Well, it's like you said, we've hit on it before, but if you go in with a 10%, 20%, 15%, whatever your profit margin may be, a lot of people look at it like, when we come in at 12%, we made money. We just didn't make what we wanted to make. Well, in some aspect, yeah, you have, but you bid this job at 20%, but you come in at 12, you lost 8% of your money.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have went to a bank to say get a line of credit or borrow some money, and you showed him your projected projects and your projected profitability, then you're not hitting that margin. Mm-hmm. Then I can see your line of credit starting to climb pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're not holding up your end of the deal. The bank's like, here's the money, but you're not holding a steady profit margin.
So if you did want to start your own company, let's say you're someone who's been in the industry now for 10 years, 15 years, you probably have a good idea of how things are run, at least at the lower levels. But are there any positions or like employees that maybe you wouldn't think about if you hadn't been a part of the office world, running on the business side of things, that you might actually need, that you hadn't taken into consideration?
Yeah, and that's going to really go back to you on your skill set. As a startup company, what can you do? Can you estimate work properly? Can you do an accurate takeoff? You're talking about missing materials. Materials. When you look at a set of plans, you should be able to get a pretty good idea, if you know what you're doing, of what materials that you've got to have for that project. Mm-hmm. You get quotes from suppliers. I always recommend a minimum of 3 suppliers. To make sure that somebody's not taking advantage of. Have a minimum of 3 quotes. And if you're not confident in yourself to do that takeoff, or feel like then you're going to need an estimator. Whether it's someone you put on staff, or whether you pay somebody $200 to $500 per project to do a takeoff for you. There's a lot of estimators out there that are retired. A lot of estimators do work on the side, and I've done that for a while. When times were tough, I was estimating on the side. But you need to, if you don't feel confident enough, that you can do and you can't afford to put someone on the payroll, because it's going to cost you several $1,000s a year, because most senior, estimators / project managers, they're going to come with a hefty price tag. Mm-hmm. So, my recommendation would be, if you're not 100% sure that you can do an adequate takeoff and get your quantities right, have somebody do it for you. And there again, they can estimate and do your takeoff and give you your quantities, but as far as time, what equipment you have available, what manpower you have available. So you as an owner, or you as an estimator, you've got to be able to look at that project and say, I can move this dirt in this amount of time. I can put this pipe in this amount of time. And we've said it before, it doesn't matter if you're working out in an open field, if you're working downtown, your production rates change. And we all can be bidding against one another here. And depending on we were talking about it earlier, what kind of rapport you have with your material suppliers, our materials, if we've done an adequate takeoff as far as 4 different companies, our materials should be within 1 to 2% of each other. So at that point, materials become irrelevant. So where you make money or lose money is if you don't look at that project and say, I can put this in X amount of days. Well, this guy over here is like, I can put it in in this amount of days. Well, y'all got different. That's where you win a bid or lose a bid is, based on your time you have for your people and your equipment. And if you do win a bid, it doesn't mean that you had the right amount of time in there. This other guy over here, he might have had, 2 more months of time than what you had. Well, in all reality, when you get in there, you can't do it in your time frame. So the first thing to go is your overhead. You lose your overhead. Second thing that goes your profitability. You lose your profit. Well, I guess your profitability is the first thing you lose because your overhead you got to pay it regardless.
Yeah.
So you start dwindling away, and then you finish that job, and you come out with 8% profit, and you're like, oh man, I didn't make my 20%, but I made 8%. Well, no, you didn't. You lost
made
12%.
4%.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about if you did start your own business? Is it conventional to hire like an expert for consultation? Like, let's say you were doing takeoffs for the first time, or you're doing, proper bidding for the first time. Is it common to bring in, at least in the short term, the first year or two, like an expert, someone that you've worked with in the past, that you trust their capabilities? Is that common?
I don't know how common it is, but I mean, I would highly recommend it, especially if you don't feel comfortable doing a takeoff or estimating, or haven't had any experience in it, then I would say you're not ready to start your own business. But if I did start my own business, yes, I want someone there, advising me, giving me pointers, or someone I could pay a little bit of money, to do a takeoff or two and let me watch them, and
Spend
learn.
a little money to save a lot of money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because, I hate to see people, and that's what we, had originally started Profit Dig for, was to help small businesses that couldn't afford the tools that are available. We're trying to give them something that is affordable, that, what you pay a labor in a day's time, you can have our service for a whole month. And there's other services out there besides Profit Dig. It's just going to cost you a lot more money. But, I just got tired of seeing a lot of people that start up and last a year or two, then they go out of business.
Mm-hmm.
And not that they weren't good people. They were good people. And they had good work ethic, and, and they knew construction, but they just did not know the business side of it.
Yeah. Are there any good resources out there to learn the business side of it? Like, obviously there are academic paths, and then there's the path of going up through a company and seeing the different aspects of it. But are there any, anything beyond those two different branches that are available for people to kind of gain that knowledge beyond just those two?
I don't really know because I haven't sought those out. I've never had to have that. I'm sure they are, to an extent. I don't know how far they would take you, but, just kind of put things in perspective. And I'm sure I'm speaking for a lot of senior estimators and senior project managers out there, but, I spent, 15 years in the field before I got into any kind of project management.
Mm-hmm.
I started from a laborer, worked my way up to a pipe layer, and then I went from a pipe layer to a foreman, run a pipe crew, and I was always interested in grade work. And then after that, I went to a foreman as a grade foreman, and I'd done that for several years. And then I went from a grade foreman to a superintendent. I was over grade crews and pipe crews. And then I went from that into a project management role, estimating / project manager. And I didn't just walk in and start estimating work. I walked in, I spent like 8-9 months under someone else learning the trade. And then once I got a good grasp of it, they kind of turned me loose, do my own thing. But I wasn't really seasoned for another 2 to 3 years. I still had a lot of questions. I still go to my senior project manager and ask questions, how do you do this? Or how would you tackle this? And, it's a big undertaking, and I'm not a college graduate. I mean, I'm a high school graduate. I worked my way up. I tried hard. I worked hard, and worked my way into it. So I'm not saying you got to have a college education to do this job. And a lot of places require at least an associate's degree to have the position I've got now, mm-hmm. minimum. And some places even require an engineering degree to have the job like I have now. So, it's anything's possible with hard work and trying, just not giving up. You got to have a end game, just like whenever you look at a project, you got to have foresight. You got to see how that site looks now and what it's going to look when it's finished to be able to do your job and do it right. And that is from a foreman to a superintendent to a project manager. You've got to be able to look at raw piece of ground or whatever your canvas may be in your situation, and you've got to be able to see in your mind what that's going to look like when it's finished, and you also got to see in between how you're going to get it there. You may see it one way, I may see it another. Whose way's best? I don't know, but we both got to come up with the same end game.
Well, Jeff, for somebody just starting out, I mean, would you recommend that they take an educational kind of route, or just go to work and learn on the field?
Well, there's nothing wrong with education. You know, I mean, I believe in education. I've got 3 kids. Got one that just graduated college. I got 2 more that's in college. And I have 2, you know, that's got degrees. And, you know, one's working on a degree, one has a degree, and then my other one is going to trade school. My son, and you know, he had the same options that my 2 daughters had. You know, to go get, you know, some kind of business degree or doctorate or whatever he wanted to do, but he chose a trade school. And he's going to graduate with an associate's degree, and if he wants to on his dime, he can go on, you know, for another couple of years and get his bachelor's degree. And that's about, you know, $25,000 a year difference in pay from associate's to a bachelor's degree in his field he's going into. So that's up to him. That's a decision he has to make. But I've taught him as much as I could, you know, as he was growing up, you know, how to work and work hard, just like I did my 2 daughters. And, you know, you can have an education and still be someone out in the field, you know, boots on the ground doing the work. That education, you're not going to lose it. Once you have the education, it's always going to be there. You got that degree. So my suggestion would be go get your education, get out in the field, learn your trade that you're interested in, see it from the worst to the best. And then you can do a better job at what degree you have.
When you're trying to find good labor, are there any characteristics or personality traits that you look for? Like if you're a foreman or a super and you're hiring for a position, if you've never met this person before, what sort of characteristics do you look for? And the opposite, if you know them really well but you're not sure how they would handle another challenge or another career opportunity, you know, within your company, are there different characteristics for that, or is there common ground between the 2?
Well, it's kind of a give and take. You know, it's like if you're looking at someone coming in entry level that really doesn't have a whole lot of experience, there's not a whole lot you can search for other than personality. I mean, you know, you look at them and you interview them, you look at their resume, which most of the time is very slim at an entry level, and you just have to be willing to give someone a chance. You know, within the first couple of weeks to a month, you're going to know what kind of person they are. You know, if they start calling in, like my car broke down, you know, my dog ate my keys, you know, something like this, you know, and they can't make it. You know, you learn pretty quick, you know, what their characteristics are and if they're going to be a long-term employee. You know, the company I work at right now, you know, most of our employees have been there for 10 plus years. That's a good company to work for, and we hire good people. Mm-hmm. It's tough to find good people. You know, we typically try to look for someone that's got experience, you know, but we're not appalled by someone that doesn't. You know, we're willing to give you a learning opportunity, but you got to be willing to earn that opportunity. So it's a give and take. You know, we do, you know, some turnovers. You know, we hire a lot of people and they come in and they promise you they can do this, promise you they can do that, and you learn pretty quick they can't. But then you have this one, and all of a sudden, you know, he doesn't know anything. He asks questions. He works hard. And then in a few weeks, you know, he's gone from a laborer to a pipe layer. I mean, just a few weeks. And then, you know, he's interested in equipment and stuff. You know, he stays there for 6 or 8 months, maybe a year. He gets on equipment, learns a little bit about it, then bam, he's an operator. You know, he's not that good of an operator, but we give him a chance, you know, we start doing him on little stuff, you know, and he progresses, and then he becomes to be one of your better operators. And then that's one thing we believe in, I believe in, is trying to move someone up in the company. You know, we train them, try to give them every opportunity, but first and foremost, you got to be willing to show up. You got to be willing to work hard. You got to be willing to learn. You know, if you can't do those 3 things, you're probably not going to last very long. Now, if you've got a major corporation, I can see where someone like that would get lost in all the employees. You may have a job there for a long time, but you're one of them. You get moved from this department to that department because nobody wants you. You won't put the effort in. And, you know, which I like a smaller scale because I can give them the boot. you know, if you're not going to put the effort in, I'm not going to put the effort into you. I give you opportunity, you know, and if you want to learn, it's there. I gave you this chance, I gave you that chance. 3 strikes, you're out. You know, and it's and that's the way I believe in it. You know, and but as far as looking for someone, every industry have people that's been around for a while. You know them, you know of them. You know, but you've heard of them. They're good employees. They do good work. You try to get those employees, but when you've built a name for yourself, there's other people standing in line too. When you become available, it's hard to get, you know, to grab those people. So, you know, you look for quality people, but a lot of times it's best to find quality people, and it's hard to do, and train them up and make them the person you want them to be to fit your company.
So on the opposite side of that discussion, let's say you are new and you're scoping out the different opportunities that are available to you. What would you look for in a company?
Well, someone like I just, you know, spoke about our company, you know, is when you see multiple employees that have been there for 10 plus years, that tells me that's a pretty good place to work for. You know, look at their benefits they offer. You know, how much is it going to cost me out of pocket? You know, and you may have to work there for a little while to find out all the information, you know, but, you know, if it's a company you're interested in, get in there, you know, and I don't necessarily condone job hopping, you know, because I look at consistency. You know, if you come to me and you're a seasoned employee, I'm going to look at your resume. Well, he spent 2 years here, he spent 6 months there, you know, he spent 4 years here. You know, he's not really dependable. You know, it's like first 50 cents on the hour, $1 on the hour, he's gone.
The balance there.
It's a balance, yeah, and it's, I don't know, it's just one of those things, you kind of got to play it by ear, but you know, you want to look at companies, in my opinion, that offer, you know, best benefits, best fringe benefits, good pay, and look at longevity. You know, the other workers that are there, how long have they been there?
Is that an unreasonable question to ask if you're in the field searching for opportunities?
No, not
to
at all.
say, you know, like what's the average
Not at all.
employment duration of your employees?
Well, you know, and just to put things in perspective, the company I work for now, the opportunity came up for me to work there. Well, there had to be an opportunity for me to be there. So the opportunity was, the guy that was there was leaving. I had an interview with him, and he went on this whole spiel about how, you know, this was one of the greatest companies he's ever worked for, you know, and he's like, you're going to be so happy here, you know, and on and on. And I listened to him, and when he got done, I looked at him and I said, well, if it's so great, why are you leaving? You know, why would you leave a company that you've built up, you know, so strongly? And his answer was, and I couldn't, you know, discredit it. He's like, you know, I've got a once in a lifetime opportunity to take a position I've been wanting for a long time, and I've got to do it. He said, but I'm telling you. So that gave me comfort, like, you know, hey,
Not just blowing smoke.
not just blowing smoke. Yeah.
Still a good opportunity.
Yes. But, you know, when someone builds something up like that, you know, on the forefront, I was taking his position, so I looked at him and, you know, first question in my mind, if it's such a great company, why are you leaving?
Yeah.